Second hour of the Elias Macko Show, and we begin this second hour with Anthony Housefather, of course, the MP for the Mount Royal riding in the House of Commons, and last week getting some kudos from members of the Anglo community for sticking up for Anglos. A letter that he wrote to Marlene Jennings at the QCGN has been widely distributed. And to talk more about the issues at play in Bill 96, Anthony Housefather joins us on the program. Mr. Housefather, thanks for coming on the show.
You can call me Anthony. Hi, Elias.
Anthony,
great to be there.
My man Anthony, great to have you back on the show. So let's get down to this. You wrote a letter to Marlene Jennings at the QCGN last week. Of course, the QCGN has been very vocal, and they're raising alarms over Bill 96 and how it could impact the Anglophone community. In the letter you wrote to Marlene Jennings, you write, "I share many of your concerns about the bill." What are your concerns?
Well, I'd start from the fundamental construct of the bill that the Charter of the French language will now supersede the Charter of Rights, so that the collective rights under the Charter of the French language of what they call the Quebecois nation or the Quebec nation will infringe on charter rights under the Quebec Charter of Rights. They can't do it for the Federal Charter of Rights. And basically, you would no longer be able to make a claim under the Quebec Charter of Rights that there's a liberty interest that is being infringed by this law. And that's not only one issue. The second issue is the notwithstanding clause on both the federal level and the Quebec level is being applied in an umbrella way preemptively so that nobody can challenge the vast majority of this bill under either charter. So to me, that is fundamentally not how we believe as Canadians we're supposed to govern ourselves. We believe that there's a charter of rights, that individual rights are ones that take precedence over any law, and the protection of the rights of minorities has to be protected from a legislative majority, and that's not how this bill works.
How do you push back? How do you advocate for the Anglo community without stepping on toes provincially? What's the right way for the Anglo community to fight back here?
So this bill is going to go to legislative hearings in August or September. And the right way is through our members of the National Assembly. We need to have English-speaking community organizations that are invited to testify at the hearings the National Assembly will hold, meaning that one of the parties needs to put them on the witness list. And then those groups have to effectively go and present the case as to why this bill needs to be amended. And then we have to hope that those sane voices will convince the majority of members of the National Assembly to amend the bill. And as a federal MP, I have no vote. And often people say, well, you're a federal MP, you shouldn't involve yourself in a Quebec bill. And that's generally the case. But here, I saw that people within our community were really concerned that nobody at an elected level was speaking for them at all. And I felt I had to say something, even though it's not a federal bill.
Well, that certainly leads me to my next question, because in the aftermath of Bill 96 being tabled, what we were hearing from our listeners is, who's going to protect us? We've got no one in the provincial government. Obviously, even the provincial Liberal Party is looked at as a party right now that will not stand up for Anglophone rights. Then you look federally, and there was a thought, geez, in light of recent developments with the federal Liberals and how they view language, and some words from Mélanie Joly, that no one was going to stick up for Anglos. Now, I need to ask you this, Anthony. We have seen, it's in recent memory, whether it's Emmanuela Lambropoulos, the MP in Saint Laurent, Chelsea Craig, who ran the Liberal Party of Canada, their Quebec chapter. They made some commentaries. It was whether it's in meetings or on social media. Journal de Montréal writes an article about it, and then it feels like they're thrown under the bus by the Liberal Party. How far can you go without worrying that you yourself will end up with an article written about you in Journal de Montréal, that you're an Anglophone and you're trampling on Quebecois rights, and then you're told by the party, hey, stand back, stand down, Anthony. Are you worried about that?
I mean, I think you always have to measure your words, and you have to say what you think in a way that's constructive and effective, and I always will try to do that. I do believe that French is a minority language in North America, and that you do need to have laws that promote French, but it can be done without attacking the rights of the English-speaking community, and the English-speaking community is not the enemy of French. We're the best allies of French in Canada. And I always try, we had a debate in the House of Commons on the future of French in Montreal, and I was the only MP in that debate to speak in English and to talk about there's also concerns that the English-speaking community in Quebec has, and we have to balance them. I'm always going to try to take that constructive approach. And I would say that while there is concerns that people have expressed, the federal Liberal Party's views on language and on minority language rights are vastly different than the views of any of the other federal parties. We don't believe in legislative asymmetry. We believe in substantive equality. And I can point to example after example, reintroduction of the Court Challenges Program, amendments that I personally have made to the Divorce Act and now the Broadcasting Act that enhances minority language rights. I feel very comfortable within my party being an advocate for minority language rights, and I have a lot of allies in the party.
We're with Anthony Housefather, MP in the Mount Royal riding in the House of Commons. Anthony, you mentioned asymmetry when it comes to official languages. So I want to get the Liberal Party's position on this, because I've been hearing more and more. It seems like, and Mélanie Joly seems like she's much more open into asymmetry when it comes to how the English language is treated as a minority language in Quebec and how the French language is treated as a minority language in Canada. So tell me, what is the current thought here? Because I'm a bit confused. Like,
Sure.
Is it asymmetry or not when it comes to official languages in this country?
So her white paper is called Substantive Equality, which is not asymmetry. Asymmetry would mean that you would have a legal text that would distinguish between the rights of English-speaking Quebecers and French speakers outside of Quebec, and that is not our position. Our position is that you have legal symmetry, legal equality, and then you have you look at things substantively, which may mean that, for example, the needs and the way you need to interpret the legal text for a French community in Saskatchewan is different than the way you may need to interpret it for a French community in northern New Brunswick, where Francophones are the majority, and the same is true between Anglophones in Montreal and Anglophones in Gaspé. But we certainly believe in legislative symmetry, and I would note, in that same House of Commons debate I referred to, the Conservative leader Erin O'Toole said that French was the only language that needed protection in Canada, and himself argued for legislative asymmetry in the Official Languages Act. So that is not our position.
Anthony, just refresh my memory. When is the next election? What's the day you've decided on?
I have no idea more than you.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought it was out. With that in mind, there is an election coming up eventually, right? All signs, you look at the stars, they're pointing towards an election, whether it's the late summer or early fall. When we get into this election, I feel there's a concern amongst Anglos in Quebec that the Anglophone community will be the sacrificial lamb to get the Liberals the majority they want and Quebec voters, right? What can you tell our listeners that have those fears, that when it comes down to it, the Liberals will have to make tough decisions and they'll choose to go after votes than Anglo rights?
I mean, we've had to make tough decisions recently in terms of, well, they're not tough for us, but I mean, they're decisions that clearly go in this area. The Bloc, for example, presented a private member's bill supported by the Conservatives that said that in order to become a citizen in Quebec, a permanent resident would have to have adequate knowledge of French as opposed to either English or French, which would have vastly prejudiced communities in my riding, such as the Filipino community, where people work 2 jobs and may not have time to master French, even though their kids will go to French school and become fluent. And we voted against that and stopped it from becoming law. The same is true where all the other federal parties took the position that we should allow Quebec to occupy the space in terms of federally regulated workforces and allow them to apply Bill 101 to federally regulated workforces. Mélanie Joly said, no, we're going to occupy the space ourselves. And we will have our own method of dealing with it, but we're not just going to simply allow Quebec to occupy the space. while English-speaking Quebecers are always, as Marlene said, sometimes we're the least popular minority in Canada, Marlene Jennings, we need to be sure that our MPs will advocate and fight for us. And I can assure you that within the Liberal caucus, there are all kinds of MPs that are doing that, and you have we have the backs of the English-speaking community of Quebec, and I will be there to fight always for that.
One quick last question, because you brought up the Filipino community in your riding, and I view Filipinos as part of the next generation of Anglos of Quebec. The Quebec government in Bill 96 wants to make it very clear they get to decide who's an Anglo. You come here from the Philippines, you want service in English a year after you arrive, or 2 years or 5 years, you're not going to be able to get it. Who gets to decide if you're an Anglo or not?
I think that I agree with you completely. Under federal rules, we talk about first official language spoken, which allows everybody in Quebec. That would mean the English-speaking community is 13.7% of the population. If you look only at mother tongue, we're 8.9%. And if you look at what they're trying to do in Bill 96, which is eligibility for English schools, it would be even less than that. And of course, my argument is that everybody who wants to be part of Quebec's English-speaking community should be allowed to do so. And certainly, there should not be historical Anglos who are entitled to services in English and other people not.
Anthony Housefather is the MP for the Mount Royal riding. Great conversation. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much, Elias. Have a great day.